Welcome to our Best Practices for Online Learners workshop, sponsored by Phi Theta Kappa. We are so happy that you can join us for this. We feel like this is probably one of our most timely webinars to offer. So we really are excited to have Phi Theta Kappa members and other students, anyone who is just feeling a little trepidatious about moving from on-the-ground classes to an online learning environment. We are all going to be giving best practices and expert advice to help ease those nerves. So we really do appreciate your time with us, and know that we have a brilliant panel that has years of experience with coordinating, developing, and teaching online courses, and they're going to be sharing their best practical advice. And we also have a student, and so we're going to have some firsthand student advice for their fellow students as well. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. My name is Jennifer Stanford, and I'm going to be the moderator, posing questions to our panelists. I work at Phi Theta Kappa as the Associate Vice President of Program Implementation, mainly with our student engagement side. And I'm joined by one of my fellow staff colleagues, Dr. Johanna. Johanna is our current Associate President of STEM and Workforce Programs, but she has so much valuable experience as an online professor as well. And she is in the STEM world, so she's going to talk very specifically about that. She still serves as an adjunct online instructor through Hines Community College, and where she was also a Phi Theta Kappa chapter advisor. Next, we have Jennifer Jones, who is also a Phi Theta Kappa advisor at Alamance Community College in North Carolina, where she is the Director of Distance Learning, and she was recently certified to teach our online curriculum Leadership Development Studies program as well. So we're very happy to have Jennifer join us. And Ronald Payne is a biology professor who designed award-winning science online curriculum, and he's also a professor not only in geology at Century College in Minnesota, but also at the University of St. Thomas. Raul, we've worked with him closely on our Honors Program Council, and we're so excited to have Raul's experience and expertise with us today as well. And then last but certainly not least, David Parker. Some of you who are in Phi Theta Kappa may recognize David as our 2018-2019 International Officer representing Division II. He is a Phi Theta Kappa alum from Collin College in Texas, but now studies at Mississippi State University, where they are online. And he is an educational psychology major with a minor in art. So we're going to have a rich discussion. I believe you can tell already. So let's dive in. We are going to start out about the advantages of online courses. And, you know, I know as a student, I'd like to particularly pose this question to you. What for you are the advantages of moving to an online curriculum?
Well, we have to admit there are certainly plenty of advantages that can be empowering to students, with some courses more asynchronous, where students can go at their own pace, that provides some flexibility for those students and also allows them to kind of take control of their schedule more. That's probably the biggest thing that pulls students to taking online courses. Even if it's not mandated by the university, students might see a course that they want to have more self-direction in, and they'll sign up for an online version of that. And being able to work from home is definitely a big advantage, although there are caveats to that. But being able to work from home, comfort of your own home, that's also an advantage.
Absolutely, and we are going to talk through some of those caveats you alluded to as well. Is there anybody on the panel that would like to share what they feel like is an advantage, even from your teaching perspective? That would be fine too.
Sure, it gives you constant access to the course content. Usually when your online courses are built for that purpose, you have access to the material all the time, where when you're in the class, you're listening to the professor, and then when that time is up, that information is still in the classroom unless you took extremely detailed notes. You'll have it in your notes. But when you're taking online classes, you can always go back and revisit the lectures, revisit the video, revisit the content. It's always right there. So you have that consistent access to the course content.
Right, I agree. I agree with Dr. Williams. In my courses, I provide my students everything on the first day of the class. So they have an online textbook that is embedded into the portal. They have access to quizzes, assignments, lecture videos, notes, and everything is opened up on the first day of the class with a course schedule. So they can work ahead and finish a 17-week course in 10 weeks if they want. So that's another advantage if they're being able to finish the course sooner, if they're motivated, if they have time. But if not, they can still stick to the schedule and work their way through the semester at the pace of everyone else in the class as well.
Right, that's a very good point. I know that may vary class by class and professor by professor, but there are some significant advantages to online curriculum, as you guys have pointed out. So maybe in we're going to be taking hybrid courses. I know that it's they're probably, I know, Jennifer, you were speaking to this earlier in your particular college. What is the breakdown for this fall in terms of online, on the ground, and hybrid?
We're about 50% online, about 40% hybrid, and about 10% face-to-face.
Okay.
So we've got about 90% of our students online in some fashion or way, and that's just like both of us said, it's great because you can have your content, you can go back to it, you can look at it. You also have access to your grades all the time, so you can always kind of see where you are. If you missed an assignment, you can see what you've submitted, what you're doing. So.
Right. That's an excellent point. You guys, I feel like that we hopefully have laid out that there are many bright spots being online with your education. And know that during our second part of our workshop that's going to happen on Friday, we'll talk more specifically about engaging in campus resources, even if you are in a situation where those are virtual access as well. So we're primarily on the curriculum and using your college's online platform, but know that student engagement is going to be a big focus for us on Friday. That is a critical part of your education as well. Okay, so we've talked about some advantages, and we want to set up the next section by just talking about some potential pitfalls of online courses, things for you to be prepared for so that you really can excel in your courses. And especially for those of you with high GPAs, we know you do not want to falter this fall. You want to stay strong, stay on track with meeting your goals. And that's why we're having this particular workshop, is to help you prepare for those pitfalls so that you can avoid them. So perhaps we should start out by talking about, there are some things that, now that so many things have moved to Zoom, I know I related very well to this particular, cartoon, you would say, and Jennifer Jones actually put this on her Facebook page. Maybe even some of our panelists. I know I have had to do strategic cleanup for Zoom calls. But as we've moved online, there certainly has been no shortage of external distractions. And so who would like to jump in first? I guess one thing I will say before we talk about external distractions, because I don't want to gloss over this. And Rahul, I think you have some specific advice for those students who may be struggling with not having access to a computer or reliable internet at home.
Right.
What would you say to those students?
So even before we get to that, let's think about how an online course is structured. For most of the online courses, either your professors are going to open up the entire course for the entire semester for you ahead of time, or they'll open it periodically on weekly basis. So if you do not have a strong internet connection at home, one of the things that some of my students have done is they'll drive to the school, They'll keep sitting in the car, go to the parking lot, and be able to access the Wi-Fi, the school Wi-Fi, is safely from their car, right? From the safe bubble of their car. Or they'll go to a coffee shop and stand outside the coffee shop. But while they have access to high-speed internet, download everything that is available for you to download and save on your computer. Most probably the kind of things that your professors would expect you to do online live is going to be taking quizzes or exams. And some schools have the proctor you or proctoring services that watch you. Some schools do not. At my college, we do not require students to be in a proctored environment. We just time the exams, so students are able to finish the exam in a very specific given amount of time. And the idea behind it is that if you do not know the answer, you're not going to be able to find the answer in a book or by Googling it, which is another thing I want to point out. From a teacher's perspective, when I write exams that are to be taken online, I always assume that students have access to the internet, they have access to their friends, they have access to their books. So my questions are never questions that can be Googled. These are the questions that students have to apply the knowledge. So if they have to apply the knowledge, then there's a limited amount of time within which they have to think of the answer and respond to the question. So there's part of the course that you can download and save and study at home with. And if you have high-speed internet only available at certain given specific times or places, I would just download the material and only use the internet when it is absolutely required, and by doing things like going to the school parking lot, or if you feel safe walking into the library, maintaining the right social distance with other people and getting your work done. Find a corner of the campus where not too many people frequent, and maybe that becomes your study zone, and go and study there.
Yes, that's a very good point, because not all campuses, as we've talked about, are completely closed. And if your campus is closed to, the general public or students, then your community library or other places in town that you've mentioned that do free Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. All right, that's really important. Okay, so let's talk about, as we delve into, especially if you're working from home, you're going to have more of the external distractions. And so I'd like to start us off with maybe the family and pets, looking around your house and realizing how much housework there is to do, so that can be distracting. Who would like to start us out?
Well, I think a great idea is to find a spot that's going to be your study area, and then make sure that everyone else in your household knows that. Even if you put a sign on the door like, I'm studying right now, or I'll be studying for a couple hours, but you have this designated study area so that you can't be distracted by your family. And in that study area, you should really set it up like a study area. Like, you don't have a TV available. You're not next to where you can open up things that distract you. Your cell phone might be on the desk across the room. So you want to make sure that that area is set up for studying, and that other people in your household knows that when you're in there, you're taking a test, or you're studying for an exam, or you're doing your content. So that's one of the main things that I tell my students, is to get that study area, set it up like a study area, and then make other people in your household aware that when you're in there, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great idea. And I always tell people to look at their typical day. I know we teach a student success course, and one of the activities that they do is they have to take a week and they just write down almost everything that they do, and then they go back and look to see what they spend their time on. Because I know sometimes we hear is, I just don't have time to do online, or I don't know, I don't have 2 or 3 hours to sit down and work on a class. And I don't think you have to. If you can identify chunks of time, even if it's just 30 minutes, find somewhere to work, but then schedule your time too. So if you can find, and know that I've got 30 minutes during this time and maybe 30 minutes a little bit later, that kind of helps you, as you're approaching your class, you don't feel as overwhelmed in the beginning. When you look at your week's worth of activities, you're not thinking, when am I going to have time to do it? If you kind of plan that out a little bit, that helps too. And if you are struggling, if you don't have equipment, or you stuff like that, check with your college. I know we've purchased about 200 laptops and Chromebooks this summer that we've been loaning out to students and faculty and staff. So if you don't have a computer or if you don't have access to something, let your instructor know, and they can usually get you to the appropriate, person to kind of help you out that. So there's assistance to kind of help with different things.
A personal strategy I use that this discussion has reminded me of is called time blocking. And you just divide your day up into maybe 15 or 30-minute increments and then really plan out what you're going to be spending your time on. When you're doing online classes, it's so easy. I know all the students who are listening in can relate to this. You have a class, you have to watch a lecture by the end of the week. It's Monday, no worries, Tuesday, Thursday, but then it's the end of the week and you haven't done it yet. So it's really important to, even if there's not a set class time, find a dedicated time. If it's a 3-hour course, find at least 3 hours just to focus on the lecture. That doesn't include time working on homework. I know I believe it was my freshman year, for my first online class, I didn't do that. And after a couple of weeks, I realized I had totally forgotten I had enrolled in this online class. So you really have to dedicate time to these online classes, just for the sake of remembering that they're there. Because without the physical reminder of walking into a classroom and listening to your professor multiple times a week, it's really easy to drop the ball and get behind.
It's a great point.
Yes, very good point. And really, David, you're getting it more into that self-motivation and avoiding procrastination for classes, because you're right. If you're not on that strict structure to schedule, it can be difficult to maintain a really good effort for an asynchronous class. So any procrastination tips that you guys would like to share? I loved that Roel has already shared that there are classes that are going to be open and you can go through them even faster. We certainly have seen Phi Theta Kappa members Zoom through our online courses. Once you get in there, you can use that momentum. But any other advice for that?
So I really like David's idea of time blocking. I would also add to that, what I do in my courses is I give them the entire semester's worth of schedule, and then I also add an empty column next to it, and I title that fake deadlines. So I ask my students to put fake deadlines. So if something is due on Monday, I'll put my fake deadline as Friday, and I have them fill that entire chart out. So having a fake deadline is comforting for me when I was taking courses, because I knew that, okay, if I'm able to get it done by my fake deadline, I for sure can look through the draft of my paper once more, or look through my assignment once more before finally submitting it when the real deadline arrives. So it's always a good idea to set up reminders. Now we have iPhones or smartphones or reminders in Google Calendar and Outlook Calendar. Set up fake reminders for yourself and make them really, really scary. Like, this is really due, and if this doesn't happen, you're going to get a 0, something like that, just to remind yourself throughout the semester. And that works as a great strategy, at least for me.
That's great. That's great. I'm picturing just the idea that you don't want to have to go through this class all over again. You really want to, be cognizant of the money as well as your time, and really make the most of it, that you're staying on track with your goals.
And sometimes it's also just positive reinforcement, right? I'll only eat ice cream if I'm done with this assignment before the fake deadline.
One of the things that also, when I think about some of the things that a student, especially someone new to online learning and spending a lot of time just on screen now anyway with other things happening on Zoom, is just being able to be present and engaged in maybe a synchronous class that doesn't have a professor giving a lecture online. Are there any specific strategies on that, whether it's note-taking, staying focused and in the present?
Definitely note-taking is one, because a lot of times students will think, well, this is an online class, so I don't really have to go to class and take notes. But taking notes goes beyond writing down what's being discussed in class. It helps you remember it, but it also keeps you engaged. And so as you're going through the content, it also gives you an opportunity to put it in your own words so that you understand it a little bit better. So as you're going through the content and learning the material, taking notes about the material, it's a good way to stay engaged with it. Writing down questions that you want to ask the professor, because even though they're not lecturing, they're available for you to ask any questions that you have. So as you're going through that content, writing down those questions that you're going to ask the professor is also another way to stay focused with it. And also, if a quiz is coming up or test is coming up, some teachers give study guides, some don't. You may have asked the professor, what should I focus on heavily for the test or the quiz? And as you run across those things, make an extra note or starring them to something that they said we might want to revisit later. So you really engage in the course as if you do have an instructor that's teaching you these things. And that'll keep you motivated and keep you sort of interested in the content that you're working with.
Excellent suggestions. Anyone else want to provide?
I'll add on to that. I think, yeah, take notes, please, and just have a pen in your hand. I think that's probably, if you have a pen in your hand, a piece of paper in front of you, not your phone or Hulu on a different stream, you'll be more compelled to actually take notes and stay engaged. That's, if you don't have the means to take notes in front of you, of course it's not going to happen. You have to really be proactive in making sure that even though you don't have someone looking at you, you're still that engaged student that you are in class. You could even pretend that if it's a synchronous class, have your camera on. I know that's something that works for me. I don't know if other people are watching me. I feel like I should be on task. But having your camera on just to maybe give yourself a little bit more accountability, that might be helpful too.
So I've got two recommendations and one pitfall about this question. So my two recommendations are, one, look up Cornell method of note-taking. It's some of my students have found that extremely helpful, especially in the online environment. So Cornell method of note-taking is a simple way of dividing your notebook into 3 parts, writing down freehand, writing down important things, and on the bottom, write down questions that appear to you. So that's just, it structures your notes, especially when you are taking it completely online in a synchronous environment. The second advice I have is to talk to your professor ahead of time. Send them an email and ask them if it is okay for you to record the audio of the lecture on your phone while the lecture is happening online. So make sure you have their consent. That's really important. And then you can record the audio of the lecture. The pitfall that I want to point out is I've had students do that before. And when I ask them, okay, did you listen to the audio? They say, nah, just record it on my phone. And then they think, well, I listened to it the day before, the night before the exam. And somehow it just doesn't happen. So if you are recording audio with permission from your professor, I highly recommend that you listen to it as soon as the class ends to fill out your notes and to see if you missed anything, just as a backup. But that should not be a primary source of information. The primary source should be the live lecture that you're listening to.
Sorry, I was muted. That is so important because, you know, you think about going to class every day or every other day in a normal on the ground situation, and your knowledge is building upon. So you've got a foundation that you're building upon to understand the remaining content. So yes, please don't. I mean, that, you know, honestly, there may be professors that are maybe already recording it and they're going to post it themselves, but Raul, it's such an important point that you should always ask permission before you record, even online. And one of the other things that is really very different in an online environment is just that socialization that you get from being in a classroom with other students. So are there some tips that you guys can offer just to help with that socialization?
One that I always, say is Participate in your discussion forums, not just the minimum, but, reply to posts, because that gives you a way to kind of get involved with students. And even outside of class, I know a lot of schools, and I know here with us, last week was our first week of classes, and I think almost every day our Student Government Association had something planned virtually. So participate in that. I know with PTK we've got one tomorrow for our chapter meeting that's going to be in Zoom, but get involved with things like that are being done, because there's a lot that's being done virtually. Check your website and see what's there. But participate if you can participate in some of those study sessions and things that your instructor is doing in Zoom. I know for a lot of times they're recording them if you can't be there, but anything that you can be a part of, try to do that, because that'll help out.
Yes, and I think a lot of the classes probably use online discussion boards. I know when I was taking online courses, I always made a special point to get in there as early as possible in the week, because chances are, especially whatever the question is on the topic, you are going to be, reading the same material. And so someone's going to steal your thunder if you don't get in there and post fairly early. And so always, post as early as you can. And then, as we're saying, you want to go back in and read your classmates' experiences. One of the other advantages that I found from going from on the ground to an online course is that everyone really gets a chance for their voice to be heard. I mean, I was a more introverted student, so I didn't always speak out in class, but having to write your thoughts can really empower you, and you'll be surprised at the connections that you can make with fellow students that you wouldn't even, talk to if you were going into a class. So those are extremely important elements. And we want to spend a little bit of time, especially since we have at least two STEM professors online, talking about expectations for STEM courses, particularly related to labs. So, Raul, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I teach courses in anatomy and physiology, 1 and 2 both. So it's bones, muscles, tissues in one, and the other one is about organs and organ systems. And I also teach microbiology, medical microbiology, and infectious diseases. So for those courses, it's really, really difficult to do labs at home because I'm not going to ship off bacteria to my students' homes. So for anatomy and physiology, I have lab kits from a company that I have customized to make it as cheap as possible. They are still about $200. My students buy the lab kits. I've had students who were in the Army, who were active duty, who were about to be deployed, and they brought their lab kit with them, and they did their experiments in the field. So all these lab kits, or all the experiments that I've built in them, I've made videos of me doing the experiment, so I can show students step-by-step process of doing the experiment. Of course, I'm not showing them answers or the result, but I take them to the step that they need to work their way through. And that really helps. For microbiology courses, I have my students work with the lab kits, but instead of sending the bacteria, I'm having them go buy yogurt and use that yogurt to pull bacteria from and do their experiments using those. Yeah. So that seems to be working great so far for my students, yeah.
In addition to that, and that's very similar what Raul was talking about, and there, of course, he's in biology, so they have more wet labs, which is online. But I teach computer programming and software engineering, and our labs are dry, obviously. And it's using data, writing software, things that you would normally have to do in class, but since you can't, like Raul does, I'll do examples or record myself doing it. So a lot of instructors will do that, record themselves doing a sample lab, for example, and then give you step-by-step instructions on how to do it yourself, how to upload that content or upload if it's a program, to Canvas or whatever board your learning management system is. When I was at Hines, also I was the chair of the STEM department, and so my history instructors also taught online, and they did something very similar to Raul. They would get very creative, like with the yogurt, or they'll have their students do things with things that they have access to at home. Also, they use virtual labs and simulated labs, and there's a lot of free versions of that online. And they also use lab kits, which can be expensive, but like Raul said, a lot of instructors will try and customize it so that it's not quite as expensive for you to access those kits. But there are virtual labs that some instructors use where you go to a simulated lab or a simulated classroom online, and they'll ask you, for example, if it's chemistry, which glassware you might need, or, what type of chemicals you might mix, but it's all virtual. You don't have the physical chemicals, but you have it there in a simulator. So it's a variety of different things you may come in contact with science labs online. People have to get really creative with that, but it's doable. It's certainly doable.
We do have a question from a nursing student, and I think this is a perfect time to address it. She says, they say, our online labs is valuable, incredible as a person. I am a pre-nursing student and do not to take labs online if I stick once I am hopefully accepted to nursing school.
Yes. I'm sorry if I'm jumping in, but so there's an online teaching consortium called QM, Quality Matters, and what Quality Matters does, it assigns, or it goes through a very stringent criteria to decide whether something is of high quality or not that is being taught in the online environment. And the lab kits that I'm using are QM or Quality Matters nationally certified. Not just because of COVID, but even in the pre-COVID world, online courses were something that a lot of people at higher level were taking, and these courses are well accepted, transferable as well. So you definitely will not have problem taking labs that are completely online.
It's very reassuring.
Yes.
Thank you, Raul. Is there any, Jennifer, would you say that there are students that come to you that are nervous about certain courses over others for online? I'm thinking speech, another one that immediately comes to
Right.
mind, but
Students are, a lot of times they're the lab courses, math courses, and then our public speaking courses and things like that. And just like the others have said, whether your lab is, we do a lot of the simulations and virtual labs. And we have found students really like those because if something doesn't go right, you can always do it over. If you, in the chemistry lab, if you mix the wrong chemicals and it blows up, you can redo it. You can't always do that in the lab. So sometimes you can get a lot of really good learning out of it because if you miss something, you can go back and redo that. With our math classes, we are, we are doing something that we call like enhanced learning this semester, where we're using Zoom and different things to do, even with an online class. So maybe the instructors are setting aside some time every week that they're meeting with the classes if you can attend.
mm-hmm.
And so they're using things like a simple little dollar whiteboard that you get somewhere and that you can write on and hold it up and show to your instructor in Zoom as you work something out. So there's little things that you can do if you're having trouble. I would, just like the others have said, reach out to your instructor if you're struggling, especially in those lab classes, because there's lots of ways between Zoom and other tools and Collaborate and Google Hangouts that they can meet with you and work through something with you, so that you don't feel lost or get behind to do that. So I think there's lots of things that are out there, and just let always don't be afraid to reach out and let them know that you're struggling with it. If you've got a tutoring center on campus, we have a skill center here. If you have a tutoring center, reach out to them because a lot of times they're doing online tutoring as well.
And I know one of the topics that we wanted to be sure to address is that building a rapport with the professor. And so I think this is a perfect time, to talk about that, because you do, I know sometimes it can feel very anonymous behind the screen, but I'd love for each of you to share, a specific tip about what's the best way, what's the most convenient way in terms of professors who are, probably dealing with a lot more email these days. So what is the most preferred way for students to reach out?
For me, it's absolutely email, and that's the fastest way that I can get back to my students. But also, I'm email obsessed, so I try and get back to people as quickly as I can. As soon as I have that on my phone, which probably is not very good for my personal life. But I'm constantly checking my phone and responding to students. I think in a very well-designed course, students should not have to reach out to the professors as much because everything is already laid out for them. As far as creating a rapport with the professors, I invite my students to set up Zoom meetings with me, just a 5-minute getting to know each other. But I also teach about 200 students, 200 to 250 students every semester. So it is difficult to, even with 5-minute meetings, it's a lot of time. But I do encourage them several times throughout the semester to set up a getting to know each other kind of Zoom meeting. And I think that's one way of doing it. So if you are taking online courses, I would recommend students to send out an email to the professor and say, hey, can we do a 5-minute coffee on Zoom? I just would like to get to know more about you. I'd like to tell you more about my plans and career goals and how you can write me the good recommendation letter that I'm going to need after your class. It's always good to reach out and be more proactive.
I definitely agree with that. I'm glad you mentioned the recommendation letter because that's definitely a benefit of taking classes with instructors is that, they might be able to write a letter for you later, but if they don't know you, it's very difficult to do. So building a rapport is definitely important, and you can certainly do that in an online environment. As Raul said, you can request to meet with your instructors. I actually have students who do that. Can we Zoom chat or can we do a discussion chat? Any teacher that I know, including myself, absolutely, glad to do it. And then a lot of them will email, but you want to certainly email your instructors if you don't want to do the Zoom or physical conversation. Just email and say, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. But don't let it just be the beginning of the semester because we get a bunch of emails, but be consistent and be sure to stay sort of in their inbox if you have a question or if you want to say, well, this assignment, this is applied in the real world or this is what my career goals are. Am I in the right course or is this what I would do? Just asking general questions like that. Keeps them familiar with you, also shows that you're engaged and interested, and it helps you build that solid rapport that you need with those instructors.
Absolutely.
I know that as a student, it can actually be surprisingly intimidating to just hop on this like one-on-one virtual call with a professor you might not have met before. I just had my first virtual office hour last week, and I was a little nervous about it. But a way to maybe build up some comfort is while you're doing these lectures, if they're live, have your camera on, unmute yourself, ask questions. It's a trap, really, when you have the ability to turn off your camera, mute yourself. You can just lie in bed and do your lectures. I know y'all do that because sometimes I'm guilty of it too, but hey, but really engage with your professors while there's this dedicated time during class, because what you have to do is you have to try to emulate all these in-person interactions that you are missing out in an in-person class. Even in terms of socializing with other students, you're missing out on those quick conversations like right after class ends and you're walking out the door. So reaching out, doing virtual, study groups or taking advantage of online office hours. Right. You have to realize you're missing out on a big part of the college experience, I would say, or the academic experience of building rapport with your professors, because that's so critical, and you have to go out of your way to make sure it still happens.
And a couple quick things. Sorry, Jennifer. Please.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say a couple of quick things. So what I used to do when I was able to teach on campus is to have my office hours not in my office, but outside the classroom in the student lounge area. And I would just sit there and do my work, and students could come and stop by and talk to me. But if you want to take the initiative, why don't you organize sort of a study hour and invite your professor into that Zoom meeting and say, hey, 5 of us are going to sit and study on Zoom. Want to join us? And that's a great way of showing that you're taking initiative. And reaching out to the professors that way. Another thing is, I think it is very, very, or it's completely acceptable to tell your professors that you are reaching out to them because you want to create a rapport, because you are going to ask for a recommendation letter at the end of the semester, and these are your goals, and this is why you want to set up a meeting. So they know that they would, whatever evaluation we do as professors before writing a recommendation letter, they will be able to interact with you that way throughout the semester and have enough information that you get a very specific recommendation to you and not a sort of a cookie cutter recommendation letter that we often have to write down for students who we don't know.
And I was just going to say that a lot of our instructors are doing office hours in Zoom or Collaborate or somewhere, and you can just kind of drop in. If you're a little hesitant to make that first contact, look in your course, probably somewhere around the course overview. They've got a list of their office hours. They're kind of just like what Dr. Kane was saying. They're in class. They're there, kind of waiting for folks like they would be in their office. Just you can just sort of drop in on them and use that link to go in.
Kristen asked, do you have any advice for writing emails? She's intimidated, gets stressed out, and kind of overthinks it. But I loved the suggestions about, connecting with a professor over what a particular major or career path is and using some very specific questions. I know you mentioned that in particular about, a very pointed question about maybe career advice. I think that everyone would agree that you don't want to write too excessively long emails to your professors, right? Maybe pretty short and to the point. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Yeah, No, just going to say, we always recommend that use your school email address to send it. A lot of times, I know we forward our emails to a personal email address, but if you're going to send your instructor an email, send it from your school email address so they know it's coming from a student. And sometimes it gets filtered out if it's not from a recognized email address. It may go to their spam or their junk folder. We always recommend put your course number in the subject line. So if you're taking, Business 110, put that in there so that they kind of have an idea of where it is. But, and then give them about 24 hours, maybe a little longer on the weekends to respond. But yeah, I just make sure that you're using your school email address and let them know a little idea about what's going on with it.
I agree with that. In my courses, I give a proper email etiquette document to my students, which is separate from my syllabus, but it's a part of the syllabus schedule and proper email etiquettes. And this is what I tell them too, have your course number written in the subject line so we know exactly who you are, where you are. Use the same name. Sometimes students use different names for registering into the class and the different name for their email, the preferred name. So whatever name you're registered with in the class is the name that we are going to identify you in an online environment. So be sure to mention that name with which you're registered in the class in that email as well. And then have a formality in that email. Your professor might be laid back and friendly, but any communication with your professor has to be a formal communication. So start with a proper salutation, end with thank you, write in formal language, maybe write it in Word or write it in Grammarly and have it check your grammar and spellings for you, and then copy paste that. You get only 1 or 2 chances, right, to communicate with your professors, and making a good impression means your grammar has to be good. You're writing a formal email with all the information that they're going to need for you.
Also, keeping in mind of perspective, that you may have 4 or 5 professors. As Raul mentioned earlier, he can have 250 students in one term. And so you do want to be respectful. Don't get your feelings hurt if they don't immediately know which, arc you are. Be very respectful of that. And to Raul's point, this is built for your competitive skills as well, your soft skills, not only for your classwork, that you can transfer into your work life and your personal life as well. So going on has its own set of skills, and it's not just for school. So you are gaining a lot of great experience, even if this maybe wasn't your first choice to take your classes online. We have another question, and David, I know you specifically wanted to answer this one, so let me read it out. It was It's an anonymous attendee, so just going to read their question. As a full-time student taking 18 credit hours while working 30 to 40 hours weekly, how should I go about deciding which assignments to start on first without feeling overwhelmed? That's a tricky one.
That's a good question. And it's really easy to become overwhelmed when you have to adapt to this completely new way of learning. First, know that most other students are going through the same thing, and you can build a community with them to get through it, because it is challenging. But the little personal bit of advice, and something that's worked well for me, is the system called an Eisenhower matrix. And what it is it's a grid, like 4 quadrants, and it's organized by urgency and importance. So one quadrant's going to be very urgent, high importance, and the others will be maybe low importance, but still urgent. And once you plot out your to-do list on this matrix, you can then tackle it quadrant by quadrant. And those things that are really probably stressing you out are the ones that are high urgency, really important, but being able to see, okay, this task I need to get done first so I can have the mental bandwidth to tackle the other ones. That's something that's been beneficial for me. But yeah, it is challenging, and it is hard, especially when you're working and you're adapting. So I understand.
All right. So one of the things that we haven't tackled yet, Rahul, you mentioned about some of your tests giving a very specific time frame for students to take the course and not being able to Google answers. But are there any others that want to share, and we'll certainly still share additional information about the online assessment practices for many online courses, knowing that it's professor by professor, but what are the most popular ways?
So I think for most of the schools, since this is the first week of the semester, next week will be, I think read through your syllabus carefully and look at how the assessments are laid out in your syllabus. Right before this, I did a seminar for faculty who are teaching online for the first time. And my advice to them was, do not think at exams as the only way of assessment. Assessment needs to be broken down. That 100% can be broken down as 25% exams, 25% papers, 25% other assignments, so on and so forth. So whether or not your courses have big chunk of points assigned toward multiple choice exams, which you're taking online, or papers or other assignments, figure that out first. That should be your first thing to do, is to look through the syllabus and figure that out. If anything there is unclear, write to your professors right away and ask them. Ask them if exams are going to be proctored or not, if they're going to be timed or not, right? So even before you start studying for the exam, knowing what you have to face on the day of the exam is really important. And then I saw a couple of questions in the chat as well about how to decide which assignment to handle first. A done assignment is the best assignment. So if you've not been able to do an assignment or half do an assignment, it doesn't count, right? So look through and decide and see if there's something that is due in the 15th week of the semester, but you are able to do it now. Get it done. Get it done and submit it, or get it done, hold on to it and submit it right by the due or the due date or the deadline. But there might be some things for which you might have to study. So in my classes, for example, I have a couple assignments where students listen to a podcast and answer questions. And then a couple assignments where students watch a documentary and answer questions. Again, for that, you do not really need to have built up the information from the course. It is going to be questions relevant to that podcast or that documentary. Get those done, get them out of the way, and then work at the material that so you're securing points even before you're going into the class. So that's helpful.
I think that's a great advice. And I would add too, your college may give you, I know for us in our student handbook, it has a planner in it. So it has like a little calendar that's built into it. We have our calendar and stuff in it. And so what you can do is take your assignments, because I know a lot of times you have 4 or 5 classes and you have a list here and a list there. If you don't merge them somehow, it's easy to kind of lose track of that. So if you've got a planner, and like I said, if you don't have one, just check with your college because they probably will provide one for you. But write your assignment due dates in there, whether it's a real due date or that fake due date. I really like that idea of the fake due dates. But write them in there, and then that way you can kind of plan for them as well to do that.
Right. Absolutely. Any others on the assessment aspect?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with something Raul said because it's really important, and that's to make sure that you know from your instructors how your assessments will be laid out, where some of them will have no proctor at all, others will have exams that are proctored. Some colleges, e-learning departments require at least one proctored exam, and then you'll need to know how will it be proctored. Some of them are proctored online where you have to show your ID. So you want to make sure I have a webcam and I have sound, or they might ask you some questions to make sure it's really you. Some of them have social distance labs where you'll sign up. If that's the case, you have to do that well in advance. So it's good to know how it's going to be because some of it requires some advanced work of having the technology that you'll need or being able to register for exam in advance if you have to go in person, especially now that everything's social distance and they're accepting fewer people into those testing labs. And so proctored, non-proctored, some of them have you download software lockdown browsers, for example, where you can't Google anything. So you want to make sure you have access to that and that it's working. So it's really crucial that you read through the syllabus, and if you're unclear, as Raul said, about anything related to any assessment, ask right away, because a lot of it, some of it will require some advanced work before you can take the assessment, and you certainly don't want to miss it. Mm-hmm. So those are definitely things you want to remember to check out.
Relating to online assessment, there's kind of an elephant in the room for students, and that's Quizlet. It's just kind of like a fact of the 21st century for us. And I just want to say to students, it's there, it's available, but you really have to be able to discern between your performance in a class and then also content mastery. It's very easy. Maybe I shouldn't say very easy, but it's probably more simple to get a high grade without really retaining knowledge. And it's going to take a lot of self-control for these assignments where you might not have to do as much work as you need to. Push yourself to ignore those. You can even block the websites on your browser if it gets that bad. But you need to realize that you are kind of hurting yourself in the long run by finding these quick and easy answers. Chegg, the students listening, they know all the ones. But really, when it comes time for next semester, when maybe your classes are in person and you don't have any of that foundational knowledge because you just Googled the answers, that's going to hurt. So even though students, we understand, and maybe, to be frank, it might be seen as a benefit for online classes from the student perspective, you have to really practice and exercise self-control when it comes to these online assessments. It can be easy, but the more rewarding path is going to be the one that's a little bit more difficult.
Very well said. Yes. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm just going to add to that is look at the syllabus in your class, because I know a lot of times we put emphasis on assessments and quizzes and tests and things, but don't skip over those other activities that might have a lower percentage putting so much emphasis, because if you shortchange yourself and kind of skip over some of the assignments, those small percentages of weights can really kind of add up. So I know a lot of times we focus on tests and assessments and think that's where all of our grades are coming from, but it's a lot of times it's the participation and the everyday homework type activities, the discussion forums. They can make a big part of your grade too. So, they're also going to help you prepare for that assessment. If you've kind of skipped over some of those or didn't really follow through on those, it's going to be harder to prepare for the assessment. But, don't focus so much just on the test part of it, because I think a lot of your grade comes from some of the other parts that are in the class. And sometimes we see that at the end, it may have missed a few assignments along the way thinking they were didn't count as much, but then they sort of add up at the end.
Absolutely. And the more involved you get into the work, and one advantage of a lot of online courses is the open educational resources. So there's fewer textbooks and things like that. Not in every class, but I know that was one of the comments that they're really less expensive ways to take courses now in terms of, not having a lot of textbooks. And it's, I find the reading can be extremely very relevant to your life, your real life, and you don't want to miss that. You could be discovering what you're passionate about if you engage fully in your course. So don't miss that. That's part of the college experience, one of the best parts. Well, we are almost out of time. It has really flown by. So we have just had such a great panel, and we so appreciate their time and their sharing of expertise. We want to make sure that, Phi Theta Kappa is very happy to be sponsoring this, and we're going to do another one on Friday. For those of you who are already members, know that you've got a lot of online resources that even if you're not back on campus yet, your Phi Theta Kappa experience does not have to be put on hold. There are still many, many ways for you to engage. And if you're not already a member, we'd love for you to consider joining us. We have our true mission is two-part, not only to recognize academic excellence of college students, but to support you in meeting your goals. And that's what we do for all majors, all students. And, we're not just a specific major honor society. We really are here to support all students in achieving their goals. So we do hope you'll join us. As I mentioned, Friday, we're going to dive a little deeper into accessing when you are still taking classes from home and the campus is not as accessible physically. There's still ways for you to still access those critical school supports. And we're going to talk about that as well as student life and engaging with leadership roles and experience that will really help you stand out on your resumes and in scholarship applications. You don't want to give that up because of the post-COVID world. Those are really critical parts of your college experience, and we want to help you still maintain those. And we're going to talk a little bit about lessening online fatigue, since that is such a big part of our world now. But I'm going to give the panelists a chance. If you had something that you wanted to share and you just didn't get an opportunity, I'll give you a quick few seconds to share any final words of advice. So, Raul, would you like to go first?
Sure. On behalf of all the teachers who've started their semester today or will be starting right after Labor Day, or whenever your school starts, be kind to them. A lot of us or a lot of my colleagues have no experience teaching online, and they've been just as afraid of online teaching as you've been afraid of online learning, right? So my colleagues have put in months preparing, their entire semester preparing for today, and I'm friends with a bunch of them on Facebook, and I can just see how scared they are starting this semester completely online. So just be kind to them. They are trying to do the best that they can, so give them a little bit of kindness and let them create the best course that they can for you. And it may not be perfect in the get-go. It might take a little bit of bumps in here and there for the first couple of weeks of the class. But just be patient and just be kind to them, and you'll see that together you will all succeed with your faculty members.
Very nice. So true. So anyone else want to share any final words of wisdom?
I'll give a quick statement to all my fellow students out there.
Okay.
Hey y'all, this definitely the situation that we're all going through. For many of us, it's less than ideal. I know students, we feel just subject to a system, and there's an impression that there's an expectation for us to just adapt suddenly to the system. And it's frustrating, it's exhausting, but I want to try to encourage everyone, even though it is exhausting and encouraging. Take care of yourself. It's hard when you can't socialize. School's just not the same. I know campus has been empty. Really just practice self-care. try to still make the most of it. Reach out to your professors. Most professors are here because they love working with students, and they'll be able to assist you too. But really, I just want to encourage everyone to be safe, take care of yourself, maybe meditate. I know that helps. But really, there's a community full of students. We're all going through the same thing. Even if you feel alone and you feel completely overwhelmed and you don't know what's going on, it's fine. We're all in this together.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, David. It really is true. You've got this. You're doing the hard work to prepare, and we so appreciate you and know that your Phi Theta Kappa headquarters staff are here for you. Don't hesitate to contact us. Again, I want to thank our distinguished panel. They were terrific today and shared some really awesome practical advice, and we're so glad that we have this recorded and we can share it with those that weren't able to join us live. So again, thank you all for participating, and we'll see you on Friday.